You're listening to the Team Stripes Podcast, the podcast for hockey referees. Each show, we discuss the world of officiating and find out that not everything is black and white.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Team Stripes Podcast. This is episode number 9 coming to you, and we have a very special guest for this episode. His name is David Benmocha, and he comes to us from the Sunshine State of Florida. Now, David is a former high-level player who was a pretty recent addition, I guess, to the officiating crew in his 5th or 6th season here, and he's heavily involved in officiating in Florida and in recruiting young officials. So, David, I want to welcome you on to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Brandon. That was a lovely introduction, and I really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me as a guest.
Yeah, no, we want to make you guce feel welcome, so we spice up the intros and make it extra special. So, yeah, welcome again to the show. And David, I wonder if you might be able to just kind of introduce yourself to the listeners out there and tell them a bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Florida from ages about 10 to 16. Had a really amazing opportunity coming from a blue-collar family, prep school. It's almost $50,000 a year to go to that, and I was offered a spot and a scholarship to play in Connecticut for a school called South Kent. Now they go under Selects Academy, CT Selects, and they play in the U.S. Nationals. So they're kind of like a Shattuck St. Mary, where you do a boarding school, and then you play against AAA talent and to compete for the Nationals, for the U.S. Nationals. So very amazing opportunity to be a part of that. And then from there, I went to Manhattanville College. It's a high-level D3 school right outside New York City. And we got to play some really great competition. Unfortunately, due to some injuries after my freshman and sophomore year, going into my junior year, I really wanted to focus on school. And coming from a D3 school, I had, because of my grades, they can only give you academic money. They can't give you athletic scholarships. So I was able to, when I had to walk away from hockey, I was able to keep my scholarship and maintain my path in getting a scholarship or getting a college degree. So that was an amazing opportunity. Following that, I worked in sports business, worked for the Tampa Bay Rays in baseball. I've worked for USA Football, and I've worked for the Tampa Bay Lightning and community development. So various different places that I've worked in, which is the sales, marketing side. But my passion is really the community development, growing the sport, educating, inspiring, and entertaining people, and try to recruit young kids to be an official. And some of the issues that I've seen in the past is kind of what has sparked this idea to kind of start this idea of the Panda Referee.
Right. No, and I was just going to get into that, because the way I found you was I came across, I don't know if you call it a community or a movement, but I was sort of, perplexed, because I saw this community on Instagram, on social media, called the Panda Referee, and I thought that's different. And so then when I got to talking to you and you started explaining this whole movement, I was pretty interested. So I'm wondering if you could just maybe tell the listeners a little bit about what the Panda Referee or the Panda philosophy maybe is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a lot of hockey folks out there know, because hockey officials wear the stripes, the black and white stripes, we've always been compared to zebras. But like I've mentioned to you before, I don't know if I've ever come across a 10-year-old that's ever told me that the zebra is their spirit animal and is what they look up to as an animal. And so I wanted to look at this from a pop culture standpoint. Movies such as Kung Fu Panda and kind of the idea of a panda as an endangered species, and kind of like what is a panda and how does it pertain to officiating. So what I looked at was a panda is still black and white. It may be spotted, but it's still black and white. So there's some relations, and I can still make the connection. And what I look at as a Panda ref is I'm looking at the the mentality when you step onto the ice as an official. I think what makes a big difference is when a Panda steps onto the ice, they have accepted that everything is their fault. And once you've actually accepted that everything's your fault and people are yelling at you, ref, you suck, that was a horrible call, you're able to be to kind of reverse engineer it, and you're able to deflect what isn't your fault. And you're able to be a little bit more confident in what your calls are. I think there's a lot of zebra referees, and I don't mean this in a negative connotation. This is just in kind of an analogy, where a lot of zebra referees, they get on the ice and they feel like nothing is their fault. That when they call a hooking penalty, they're calling the hooking penalty because that player hooked them. And, that's correct. But when you blame the player and you start to put a bias on it, and you start to put your emotions into that player, and you start to be like, you know what, this kid's going to the box a lot, let me keep an extra eye on him. Mm-hmm. And you may call penalties that may not actually be his fault. Maybe you've labeled him as a dirty player. Maybe you've labeled him as this, and you start to build this bias. And this is what I'd like to get away from. Zebra, the animal, is a prey to lions. And there's also this big popular movement that players think of themselves as beast mode or a lion, and that they are, they're going to go through, they're going to run through guys, they're going to put the puck in the net, no one can stop them. And, kudos to them. That is a terrific mindset. But that does not bode well when you're a zebra and you're calling yourself a zebra and you have lions out there. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of referees can atone to that, what it's like to have the pressure on you and people yell at you, and sometimes you succumb to that pressure. So how do you avoid that? How do you kind of, distance yourself from that and keep yourself unbiased? And I believe it's the accountability aspect. It's going into it knowing that everything's your fault, but yet, a panda is also under a know that they are an animal that, doesn't like to be bothered too much. They're also a bear, so you don't really want to mess with a bear. But at the same time, we're here to work with the players. We're not here to work against the players. And I feel like there's a lot of zebras out there or officials that have this mindset that, I'm the ultimate authority, and they almost kind of bait people into getting penalties, or they kind of get a power rush off the penalties and showing that they're in control. I think there's a lot of ways to show that you're in control without baiting players, and to actually be helpful and work towards a safe ending to the game. Yeah, that's kind of the movement that I'm trying to push out there. And again, for young kids, I think being a panda is way cooler than being a zebra.
Yeah, and I know we've talked before, and you've said that it's really sort of helping you to kind of get that message across, especially to younger or aspiring officials down where you are. And it's really helping to kind of, I guess, communicate, different, like you're saying, a different approach to refereeing. And I think it's really great. Like, I mean, in my experience, it's really about kind of walking that fine line when you talk about emotions and personality on the ice, because if you wanted to, like you're saying, it's so easy to just bait a player, right? Like if you really wanted to do it, if you really let your emotions get to you and lose control, it's so easy to kind of let that happen. And so I really like the idea of kind of approaching that differently, and being careful to control those emotions, and to understand, I guess, this new approach that you're talking about, right?
100%, Brandon, and I gotta let you know, my first year or two were some of the hardest years I've ever had, and when I first got into officiating, and the reason is pride, I believe. When I got into officiating, it wasn't the rules that I had issues with, it wasn't the skating, and it really wasn't, for me, there was a communication aspect. It was, I know I'm a good skater, I know I could do this. But man, when people got on me, I really just want to get back at them, and that goes to something that I've been practicing in the past, and something I continue to try to push for people is how do you show empathy in situations where someone's yelling at you. And it's so easy to get caught up and be like, well, I played this level of hockey. What do you know? You don't know anything. And that's not the right way to go about it. If someone says, you're garbage, and you say you're garbage back, that doesn't make you a good official, and it doesn't help the situation. I think what helps the situation is, let them say what they need to, but try to understand why they're saying that. Try to educate them on why they're going to the penalty. This is what I liked. This is what I didn't like. If you do it this way, you won't get called. If you do it this way, you will get called. And then, I think another thing we brought up was there's a lot of gray area in hockey. It's not all black and white. So there may be a time where I'll call a 50-50 penalty and I'll call it a penalty. And there may be another 50-50 call where I won't call it a penalty. But if I can't explain myself, then I'm not giving anyone a chance to avoid the penalty box. And at the end of the day, Panda referees, we want to avoid people going to the box because we don't want to be a part of the decision of the game. We want the players to leave it all on the ice.
No, and I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that's really a mark of a good official, and I think you hear that applied a lot to the linesmen, especially, try and keep guys out of the box. But I think overall for a referee or a linesman or whoever you are, if you can keep players out of the box without, taken away from the integrity of the game, I think that's ultimately your end goal. Because like you said, you don't want to be involved with the outcome if you don't need to. I mean, we both played hockey. We both know that it's those games where the referees are becoming hyper involved, calling everything, that you can really disrupt the flow to a game, and you can take that game out of the player's hands into the official's hands, which is what you don't want to do, right? And jumping on to another thing you were saying, you're talking about, if a coach or a player yells at you saying you're garbage. And, it can be tempting to kind of come back and say, well, you're garbage as well. I mean, the way I've always been taught is you treat disrespect with respect because, the way that you carry yourself as a coach and as a referee or a player and a referee is two different things, right? I mean, as soon as you start to go down to their level, you're sort of acknowledging that what they're doing is correct, right? So if somebody tells you to F off or to whatever, right, and you tell them to F off back, basically you're telling them that language is acceptable to use. And to me, it's obviously not. So it's kind of broaching that middle ground, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And another thing that I want to kind of add to what you were saying here is there is a big difference between an abusive official and the emotions of the game. I think there has to be a line where abusive official is when there's a personal attack. They're coming at you, and yes, it could be an emotional state of mind, but they are going above and beyond, and they are not necessarily threatening you, but they are threatening the integrity of the game, and they're being blatantly disrespectful. And by that disrespect, it's kind of like being a teacher. If you allow a kid to curse in your classroom and you don't say anything, then you're allowing that to happen, exactly. And that's acceptable. If you penalize the player for attacking the official and abusing the official, then you're able to set that standard and let everyone know that was too far. But again, going back to the other side, the emotions of the game, let the players express themselves. If they say, that's a garbage call, not to say that, ref, you're garbage. I think there's a big difference there. Ref, your garbage is a personal attack. Not that's garbage call. Why are you calling it? That's crap. Let them express themselves. It's an emotional game. The refs go through the emotions as much as the players. And if you don't allow them to express themselves, then you're going to find a lot of inconsistencies because what you may do is you may allow one guy to kind of abuse you, and then you don't let another guy abuse you, and then maybe this guy, but you don't really want to give him a penalty, and then this guy, you're just like, I don't know who you are, or maybe I do know who you are, and you're a dirty player, and that's what I'm labeling you as, and I think that's really unfair. I think you have to allow, like you said, the pace and the flow of the game dictate the outcome of the game. And for me, I know I did a good job in when I've officiated a game when the players dictated the game and everything played out. I made the calls that were necessary. I didn't make the calls because I wanted to. I made them because they were necessary. And things like injury potential plays or goal scoring opportunities. Yeah. Those things are necessary. But when we look outside of that and 50-50 calls, I think there's a lot of things that you can let go when you communicate. Yeah. I think it's very hard to let those things go when you don't communicate.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, man. And I think when you're talking about those 50-50 calls too, I think I think as long as you're saying like you communicate with the benches or you communicate with the players and let them know what's acceptable, in addition to making sure that you're consistent, right? So like if there's a 50-50 call on a slash or a trip or something that you don't call, if you make sure you don't call it both ways, then I think you're fine, right? It's I think where you get into trouble is where you kind of there's the same similar call and you call one for one team and not for the other. I think that's where you kind of tie your own hands, personally.
No, you're right. And for me, when I first started, I think something that I had to learn right away is that the rule book, the definition of that slash and the play, I don't need to put my hand up as soon as I see something. I've learned to be patient. I've learned to delay a little bit and see who's offended. Who's a guy slashes another guy, and maybe it's a 50-50 slash, and maybe I call it. Right? If I call it, and then the other guy punches him in the head, then obviously I'm taking both guys. Yeah. But if that 50-50 slash and I don't call it, and I wait and I see what happens, if the guy isn't offended and the guys are going to go play the puck, why am I stopping the flow of the game? I mean, that goes back to what you were saying, the integrity of the game, the flow of the game. If we have to intervene every single time and I'm going to take both guys, who got the advantage? No one did. Unless I'm giving a double minor to one guy and I'm giving a single minor to the other guy. But I think when it comes down to being in control of the game, I think it's more important to be in control of the game than to be right about the call.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And where was I going with this? It's interesting. Not to switch off this topic, but I wanted to come back a little bit to kind of talking about how you discuss emotions and disrespect, right? And sort of managing these games, because you're talking about managing a call here. I think when you talk about managing a call, it's also important to manage emotions in the game, right? And we could talk about this topic for days if we wanted to, but in my experience, it's like if you see a team often, you can kind of develop that rapport where you kind of know the difference between somebody being emotional, somebody being disrespectful. Where sometimes you're refereeing a younger team, you might not give them that leeway, and so I think it's a really complex, notion, I guess, to kind of manage those emotions. But I mean, like in your experience, is do you kind of give leeway to certain age groups or certain leagues or whatever, whereas in other leagues you're a little tighter when it comes to that stuff? I mean, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's all situational. I don't know if it's necessarily levels of hockey, like the older the kid, I'm going to be tighter, or the younger the kid, I'm going to be looser. I don't think it's like that. I think you have to understand who you're officiating and what does that game mean to them. If it's a championship game, I'm going to let a lot more go. If there's a rivalry where both teams are very passionate, but they're passionate in playing the game and not passionate against being in the penalty box, mm-hmm. I'm gonna let a lot go, but I'm gonna communicate that, because what you said, I think that standard and that consistency is so important. But if you don't set the expectation and talk to the players beforehand, hey guys, I'm gonna be strict on slashes on the hands, or you guys know how I like to officiate this game. I'm gonna if there's a cross check that comes too high off the back and it starts hitting the head, or if it's not at the hips, I'm gonna call it. And so I think when you set the expectation and you hold that expectation, there's not much that wiggle room for the coach and the players to kind of argue. You've set that expectation, and if they want to argue it, then they weren't listening or they weren't paying attention, and you can kind of put that on them, really. But I think it's those times that you don't set that expectation that that really become an issue. And then another thing is bad hockey versus good hockey, and I'm not talking about the skill level, and I'm not talking beginners being bad hockey, and I'm not talking the best players being good hockey. What I'm talking about is effort. If it's very hard as an official to be involved in the game and to have to work hard in that game when the players aren't giving effort. When it feels like a pickup, the energy, the vibe feels like a pickup. But as an official, you can bring that energy to the players. You can talk to the players, be like, hey Jimmy, like, you're a great player. What's up? Why are you sad? Why are you down? These people are emotional, and And we have to be also encouraging. It's not always, using the stick all the time. You got to use the carrot sometimes too, and you got to incentivize them. If things aren't going the right way, maybe you need to, sit down, and I do this a lot with goalies who are getting just lit up, like 9. That kid, his head is down. He doesn't want to get up. He doesn't want to touch the puck, or he wants to fire that puck down. He's either mad or sad. And so encouraging people, again, this goes back to managing, right? Like, you rather be in control of the game, and you rather manage the game properly rather than be right about it and treat it as if you're on autopilot. When you're on autopilot, people notice. So what I would say, things like, hey, John, I'm working real hard for you. Yeah, I want you to work hard for me too. Show me that effort. I know you can skate harder. I know you can battle more. And when you show that you care, I guarantee you they're gonna care back. Yeah. And if they care, then that's as much as you can do. But you can only control what you can control. And when you can show that empathy, that care, that compassion, they start to see you as a human being and not as just, this person that's trying to get me in trouble. So I got to be careful what I say and what I do. I think a lot of coaches coach up their players to say, don't say anything to the ref.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the right way. I mean, you can talk to the ref and it actually may benefit you. You may be able to influence the ref. Not saying that, you're going to put a $20 in their pocket. I'm saying, like, hey, ref, how's your day going? What's up?
Yeah.
This is a hockey community, and I think in the past, because of abusive official and because, they have to draw this line, that they don't, that our culture has kind of deviated away, and officials are this and players and coaches are this, where no, we're all in the same room together, and we need to work together to have a safe ending. That way our kids and ourselves, we're able to be healthy and go to work the next day, and we're able to play the game, the next day.
Yeah. I love when you're talking about bringing energy to a game, because I think that's something that we don't really teach officials enough, right? I mean, sure, we want to have officials that are impartial and, not involved in the outcome of the game, but geez, like, when I played, I used to love the refs that would talk to you during the game, great hit or, great pass or something, pick you up. And as a referee, maybe I'm not talking as much like that in higher levels where the guys know what's going on for the most part, but when I'm doing a younger level, like a peewee game or a bantam game here in Canada, I love to talk to the guys, especially because they're still feeling out the rules a little bit, right? As they progress, they're still trying to feel out the rules. So if you're in the ear saying, oh, great check, great hit, or, great stick, or whatever, I think the players get a kick out of that because it gives them a little bit of a confidence boost. But at the same time, you're accomplishing your objective because you're letting them know, I guess, where the standard's at, right? And if you're talking to them too, you're keeping them out of the box. You're letting them know, okay, you're approaching that line or whatever, right? And I love that idea of bringing energy to a game that you were talking about.
Oh yeah, 100%. And kind of like what you said, with like they get a kick out of it, especially the battles in the corner. You'll see guys battle with their stick. You'll see them battle with their bodies, and letting them know, hey, I like that. All right, at the hips. Try to make sure that their fundamentals are proper, and then and even give them warnings. You're like, hey, that's enough in front of the net. Then they give that extra whack and be like, hey man, I was telling you, you got to listen to me. I'm out here to help you. I'm not here to get you in trouble. And in that way, if there is a mistake or something that happens where you do have to penalize the kid or the adult, whoever it is, making sure that doesn't happen again. And try to again, keep that flow of the game. I think that's so important into kind of managing the game properly.
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of this comes back to, and I know I mentioned this to you when we've talked previously, but this idea of kind of building rapport. And that's sort of what you've been talking about is, taking the minute to go and chat to a player, say, hey, why aren't you feeling that, are you okay today? What's up, man? It's building that rapport, that communication, because, geez, when you start building that rapport and that communication with players and coaches, and you can talk to them on the ice saying, hey, like, watch the stick, or, great battle, I mean, I think they start to trust you a lot more, right? Because I think a lot of the time when you see frustration from players, it's when they might not trust the referees to make the right call. And especially when you're dealing with a high intensity sport like hockey, where you have the potential for injury, I think the players and coaches want to know that they can trust you to go out there and protect the players, to enforce the standard and show some energy. So I love this whole kind of theme, I guess, of talking about communication and bringing energy and the positive aspect of it, and really developing that rapport with the players.
100%, and even to add to that, being decisive. When you're a player, the game is so fast. Puck goes in the corner, D-man's chasing the forward, and he wants to be decisive, because that extra second that he might hesitate, be like, I don't know if I should do this. It might be a penalty. Might be the chance where the guy rolls off of him and attacks the net and gets a goal. So again, that consistency, that communication, that rapport is so big, and that trust. And that's something I didn't even think about until you just brought it up. Is that player trusting that they can be decisive and not have to worry about, is this a penalty, is this not a penalty? They can just go out there and play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to kind of come back to something you were talking about. How you can have those pregame chats with players. I mean, in USA Hockey, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you guys have like the meetings between players and referees at the beginning of the games?
No, there's usually not. And
because I know when I played prep school, similar to you, I mean, you played at South Kent, I played at Kents Hill, so I played against South Kent before, and I remember there used to always be those chats. I mean, I'm sure like the chats between the referees and the players before the game, right? Like on the ice during the warm-ups.
Yeah.
See, I was always a big fan of that, especially as a captain, where you could talk to the refs. It might be guys that you've never seen before, but you can at least sort of build that rapport before the game, kind of have a feel of where the refs are at. And it's something that we don't use in Hockey Canada really, except for shaking the hands of the coaches. But that was something that I really liked, and that you could build that rapport with the referees before the game.
Yeah, and I think it's not about chirping the ref. I think it's about trying to influence the ref to do what you want him to do. And it's not, and I think the encouragement also goes from player to ref as well. It's not just a ref to player where, hey, you're having a bad day, what's going on? Maybe as a centerman, and this happens quite often, maybe the linesman or the ref that's dropping the puck, maybe he's not putting the puck in the center every time, and it just takes a quick little chat saying, hey, is it me, or do I is it my positioning that you can't get that puck to the center, or what do you need from me? And once you're open, and once you don't place blame, and you're open to hey, what can I do to make your life easier? As an official, man, I get it. I love that. Like that. Yeah. That's my day. Discipline. Say a guy slash another guy, and the other guy wants to punch the other guy, and he holds up. I'll go to that player. And I'll take the guy to the box, but then I'll go to that player and say, thank you for not punching him back, and thank you for making my job easier. Mm-hmm. Yep. And they start to get that, like, that encouragement and that trust, and they start to say, like, oh, okay, he saw that, okay, good, then I'm going to keep doing that, and that right there, that's where we can work together, and we can get to an ending where there's no injuries, and there's no one, there's no bad taste in anyone's mouth, and we can all, get to a safe ending.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of touch on this idea that you're talking about judgment and talking about managing flow of a game. Now, like, any referee that's ever picked up a whistle will know that it's so easy to kill a game. And on the other hand, it's so easy to let a game get out of hand. It's that judgment really that makes a game flow well. I mean, to you, how do you manage the flow of the game, and how do you determine what calls to make, what calls not to make? Aside from, sure, we want to communicate with the players, but obviously there's going to be calls you're going to have to make regardless. I mean, how do you determine that judgment for yourself?
Yeah, I think it's the energy of the game. Going back to whether it's a championship game or no, like what's the energy, what's the vibe, what's the feel of the game? Mm-hmm. Knowing what your standard is. For me, I believe that, I want to let the players play as much as they can. So for me, it's injury stuff. 100% I'm making that call. And a lot of times when you miss that one call that could destroy the game. Like that one injury where, he did hit him from behind, or, he embellished, like, no, like you have to be firm on the injury potential stuff. And then when it comes to goal scoring opportunities, I think, again, that's letting the players decide the game. But if a guy takes a scoring chance away, pretty much, any shot that's pretty much between the pipes, if you draw the pipes from one net to the other net, and you have those two lanes in between, anytime a guy gets a chance to shoot in between there, or he has an open net, that's definitely going to be, a penalty for me. But going back to what you said, judgment and flow, I think we got to look at the history of hockey. And we have to understand its origins to understand what we will and won't call. And the history of hockey goes to pond hockey. It goes to the days where there was no official. And that's where this idea of policing each other, where fighting has become acceptable in our culture, is where this all originated. So, and so what I'm getting at here is that we started with pond hockey where there was no rules, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you have to keep that sacred. You have to keep that, as a priority, as a valuable tool, as a chance for the players to kind of play that pond hockey style. And then you work closer to the rules from there. I think there's a lot of officials who look at the rule book and don't understand the game. Maybe they didn't play it at a high level, but they look at the rule book and they try to match these words, these descriptions. All right, this is a slash. And then they look at the game situation and they try to match. Yeah. And what you end up doing is you start to call everything and you disrupt the flow of the game. It's kind of like music, right? You have a flow to the music, and the more times you pause that song and then replay it, you don't enjoy that music as much. Yeah, and I think there's something to that. And so allowing the game to have flow, maybe there is a 50-50 icing call, but the guy didn't really fire it down there, and there's a chance for a puck race. Now I understand I'm not talking NHL. I'm not talking the pros where every little detail, yes, you have to be on top of it. But I'm talking about development and youth development at a young age, and allowing these puck races to happen, allowing, I know I made the right call when the hardest working player won the puck or won the battle and did it cleanly. I really have a hard time making a penalty when the guy is working really hard and he's not rewarded for it. Not to say that I'm favoring the kid that's working the hardest, mm-hmm. but you want to allow the game to dictate itself. And once you allow that to happen, you start to get that beat and you start to know when every call was necessary. And when you do that, you'll have parents come up to you and say, you did a great job. And they may not be able to point to specifics of what you did that was great, but they know because they understand that you weren't a big part of it or that you called what was necessary. And when you do that, you're going back to the origin of pond hockey, and you're allowing the game to figure itself out, and you're holding the integrity of the game.
Yeah, and it's cool talking about the evolution of rules and how it all started out, because that's something I've been looking into a little bit recently, and it's interesting to learn. You look at an example like I don't know if you knew this, but like early on in the days of the NHL in the early 1900s or whenever it was, goalies weren't allowed to go down to stop the puck. They couldn't do a butterfly, right? And all of a sudden the leagues were finding, holy geez, like there's too many goals that are being scored, so we gotta let them come down a little bit, right? And it's amazing. You can trace back, from the early days of hockey, and you can look and see the evolution of all these rules, and it really was sort of to maintain this really good flow of the game. That's an example where there's too many goals that are disrupting the flow, right? And it's interesting. Like, I think the flow is really the main thing that people have sort of put in these rules for, right? I've always found it, I guess, pretty interesting. But I wanted to touch on I guess one element where you're talking about, you mentioned the word rewarding, and I think that's really interesting because, to me, this is not something you learn by reading the rule book, becoming one of those referees like you're talking about that just referees by the rule book. But to me, if I'm refereeing a game and I see, something that could be a trip, but I see a guy that goes down, way a little bit too easy. He's not diving, but he goes down too easy. To me, I'm not making that tripping call because of the message that sends, right? I don't want to reward that team for going down easy, because that sets a tough standard for the rest of the night, right? If somebody goes down easy, you have to call it. So I don't know if you have a view on that as well.
Yeah, this is something I've seen in the NHL a lot recently, and I'm not sure how to solve the issue. So in the NHL, we have an embellishment penalty, right? Mm-hmm. And in USA Hockey, we do not. And so when it comes to how you're gonna, handle that situation in USA Hockey as an official, I wouldn't call the penalty. So that's me kind of responding to, I'm not going to allow that to happen. But in the NHL, we have these calls that we call embellishing. So you can get a tripping penalty and you can get an embellishment. But to me, that's wrong, because you can't call both. It can't be both. Yeah. Like, it's either embellishment or it's this. So I think that's wrong. And I think at the end of the day, that's kind of like a zebra move, in an essence. Again, going back to the character, not to people in general. It's I'm indecisive, so I'm taking both, or I don't really know. I'm on the fence, so I'm taking both. And so there's a great kind of example of this. Brad Marchand. There was I don't know if it was a tripping. It was definitely, the stick was definitely between his legs, but he did kind of like a somersault. And I'm like, you're an NHL player. You don't go down that easily. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to, should there be an embellishment penalty? Is that something that is necessary? Maybe we just don't call it. Maybe we just, and I think that might be a better mindset to maybe we get rid of the embellishing, because, there's these pro players are so good at making accidents look on purpose and things on purpose look like accidents. Yeah. And I don't think you can actually figure out whether it's embellishing or not unless you are in that body, like you are that person. Yeah. Because you don't know how strong that person really is, and you don't know, is that actually embellishing. There was another scenario where a video I put out where I think Blake Como for the Colorado Avalanche, he's reaching out, Johnny Gaudreau skating past him, his stick rides up Johnny Gaudreau's stick, and it in the toe of the blade hits his neck, hits his throat, and the ref happened so fast, he calls Johnny Gaudreau for the embellishing. And it's just so hard, like you look in the video and it's not embellishment. He clearly high sticks him in the throat, and that hurts. But, I think this use of the embellishment penalty needs to go away. I don't agree with it, because again, it goes back to, could he have, avoided that, but I understand why the players do it. Like, you want to gain the advantage, and a power play is such a big advantage. Same thing with basketball. Why does basketball take so long to finish the last 5 minutes of the game? Because there's so much embellishing. There's so much, those free throws are so important to the outcome of the game, because a lot of these it may be a 2-point game or a 1-point game. So I don't want to see hockey follow down that path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I think this is a really complex issue. Like, I've had a lot of discussions with people about this too. I mean, like for me, my approach to the embellishment has always been like, I hate, like, similar to you, I hate seeing both when they make both of those calls. They make the slash and the embellishment at the same time. I really don't like that. To me, even if the NHL gets it wrong some of the time with the embellishment calls, I still want to have that in the game, because I want to really try and protect the integrity of not diving around or whatever, right? And so when I see those two calls made, like a slash and an embellishment, it really bugs me, because you're not really punishing the team for embellishing. So I get what you're saying, like, in terms of, the embellishment's it might not be helping the game. But to me, even if the NHL gets it wrong, I still like having that tough stance on that, because, like, I look at a sport like soccer. I know it's tough to compare soccer and hockey, but, jeez, I mean, like, I can't even watch 5 minutes of a soccer game because of how much flopping there is. And to me, how do we prevent hockey from becoming that way? I'm not an expert, But I liked having to see the NHL take it. Well, I mean, and the NHL and hockey in general taking a tough stance on that stuff. So I don't know what the end solution is to that stuff, but to me, I think you need to have some sort of something in the rules to tackle that.
Yeah. And that's a good point. But I also want to get your opinion on this. Do you think more tools in the toolbox is better, or do you think, because I think it's good to a certain extent where, I have options, but that doesn't mean I need to use those options, right? And maybe embellishment doesn't become a penalty anymore, or maybe it stays as a penalty, but maybe you throw fines on the really bad ones, right? And make legitimate fines, not this, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. These pros make, over 100 times that, and does that really, affect them? Probably not. So maybe you actually make tougher fines, and maybe that kind of gets them a little bit more. Because again, I mean, when you have a team that has a potent power play like Washington Capitals, like the Tampa Bay Lightning, where, for the most part their season, they're over 25% on the power play, you're really giving a significant advantage to them. And then kind of talking about advantages, because this just reminded me of something. Another way you were talking about judgment, and I was talking about pond hockey versus rule book. I look at when I call a penalty, did you take an advantage away from that player? Mm-hmm. Was there a disadvantage created? And that's really how I see the black and white. And do I make that call? Do I not? Because you know as well as I do is if you and I are skating in right next to each other, the same exact speed, and I have your stick tied up, it's not really hooking. It's not until there's a separation in space where one guy pulls away from the other guy and that stick rides up from the blade of the stick to the hands where we start to see the hooking penalty. So, was there an advantage taken away? And I think that is where I think officials need to start paying attention to the details. Not whether or not is he doing it or is he not doing it. Should I call it or should I not call it? And I think if you look at it, was there an advantage taken away, or were the players battling? And I think that is a huge I think that's a very important way of thinking about what to call and what not to call.
Yeah, and I hate to throw out the same word again and again, but I think again it all comes back to flow, right? Like you were saying, if you wanted to call the game by the book in the rule book, you could have guys in the penalty box all night. So if you can see those plays, maybe there's a chintzy hold behind the play that doesn't really impact the game, like you're saying. There's no real result that you don't need to call, and you can keep those guys out of the box. It gives you that much power to make those calls that do have that result, right? And it really keeps the integrity of the game. And I like what you're saying about, taking, it's different from the NHL to minor hockey or youth hockey or whatever, but I like the idea, like you're saying, of having that second look, by the league office or whatever, of having that, if there's an embellishment or something, to have that second look, because, during a game, it's tough to make those calls, like we're saying. You don't know if it's accidental or on purpose, the embellishment. So having that second look, the slow-mo, the 85 different angles on video, I think it really it's a good move by the league. And I don't know if the sanctions are tough enough, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. No. But anyways, I think we're nearing the upper limits of our recording time here for the I don't want to take too much time more of your day here, but sure. I'm just wondering maybe just if we could touch on a little bit. I'm sure you'll be on the podcast for more episodes down the road, but I wonder if you could maybe just touch on a little bit the hockey culture in Florida and kind of what you'd see as kind of the goal is to develop the hockey culture there. I mean, we've talked in the past about there's a difference between a hockey hotbed like Canada versus where hockey is emerging, I guess, in Florida. What's your take on the culture there, and kind of how do you progress it, I guess?
Yeah. So I think the best way to kind of start that is what does sports mean in Florida, and what sports is it's not just a sport. There's a lot. It's entertainment, right? And they are in the entertainment industry. So when we look at what are your options when do I go to a Lightning game or do I go to the beach? If I go to the beach, there is I can just spend money on parking and it's cheaper. So sports is really tough in Florida because how do you get someone to pay, good money to go to a sports game? And you look at tickets to go to a Lightning game. I mean, you'll see when we play Montreal and Toronto, half the stands is Montreal and Toronto fans. And it's because they look at our ticket price and they're like, oh, it's really cheap to go down, and it's cheap because there are other options. There's Disney World, there's Busch Gardens, there's the beach, there's Miami, there's so many options. So, hockey in Florida is really when the teams are hot, the people are hot. But how do we create that culture that's long term? And that is an interesting kind of mindset. Like, so what do we do? And so what a lot of people in Florida have been trying to do is use the Lightning success as an opportunity to kind of grow the game. And there was when I was working for the Lightning. They had a $60 million growth fund where teams in the NHL could apply and get grants. And I believe the Lightning got like $4.5 million to donate like 100,000 hockey sticks, street hockey sticks. Mm-hmm. And so when I was a part of the Lightning, we would go to these local schools, middle and elementary. Our prime age was 9 and 10-year-olds, so 4th, 5th graders. And we would play street hockey with them. We would grow the game. We'd introduce them to shooting, passing, and then we go into a little scrimmage and we take over their PE class for the day. And we would also donate to each kid a stick, a ball, and a voucher to go to a Lightning game. And that voucher would include a price for one ticket. So, these kids being kids, they can't go to the game by themselves. So the parent would have to pay a full ticket price, and then the kid can go for free. So it's almost like getting a 50% discount. Mm-hmm. Then we would donate, sticks, balls, nets, and like goalie equipment to the school. That way they can play on their own. The only thing that we weren't providing them was borders. So, it was kind of played like basketball. The ball goes out of court, whatever, you got to shoot it back in. So, so there's that movement that's happening. But what I would like to see is, USA Hockey and the NHL partnering up and working together towards, a grass movement system. And unfortunately that has not happened. I think USA Hockey has their own agenda and the NHL have their own agenda. The NHL looks at, let's grow the game, but let's grow the game for us. And USA Hockey, I mean, when I go to these seminars, they tell you, you're not going to the NHL. We're not here to promote you to go to the NHL. And to me, that's wrong. That doesn't really okay, if I can't go to the NHL, then what's the next best thing? And what ends up happening is a lot of officials get discouraged, and because of the political climate here, if you're not one of the political guys, you're not going to get a lot of games and you're not going to get a lot of opportunities. So a lot of people quit and they stop officiating. So that's a big issue because, what is the middle ground? If all right, you're not going to the NHL, but you can still become a better official. And these level 1s, level 2s, level 3s, you take a little book test and you do this and you go to the seminar, and at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that you're a smarter or better ref. And so, for me, I'm trying to find that niche that's in between that. How can I create something and to motivate people to be the best official they could possibly be and care about the sport? And, I think it all comes back to caring. I think it comes back to educating and inspiring people to play hockey and to grow the sport, and to maybe little pop-up events where you just pull out a net and play some street hockey and invite some random local kids that want to join. And I think it's going to take a lot of effort on the people in the community to promote the community. And that's where I see it. And like you said, we don't have a lot of people who know about the game but we have a lot of fans of the game, a lot of passionate people who are big Lightning fans, and they show that passion. But I think it's going to be a lot of grass movements and a lot of people like myself trying to do it on a scale that is more grassroots based. And again, I wish USA Hockey and the NHL would work together. Unfortunately, they really don't. And because of that, in order to build the culture, you're going to need that education aspect, and you're going to need to try to get people together and to work together and to collaborate. And I thank you so much for inviting me today on the podcast to kind of express those thoughts. because I hopefully this me as a guest has served you well, and if we can create a partnership, and the more partnerships that we create with other people and grow the game, I think we'll give those tools and those resources to people who generally want to learn the game and grow the sport as well.
Yeah, no, David, it's been a pleasure to speak with you, and I know we'll have more talks and more opportunities for collaboration down the road. I think there's lots that we can work on together, and I just want to thank you again for taking your time to help our listeners grow and learn. And I guess to kind of before we sign off, where can the listeners find your community at? Do you have certain social media channels that you want to check them out?
Yeah. So on YouTube, I go under the Panda Referee. And on Instagram, I go under the Panda Referee as well. So it's the _Panda _referee. And when it comes to Facebook, I also use my personal Facebook as a platform as well. And that's under David Benmocha. Benmocha spelled BENMOCHA, kind of like how it's spelled. And yeah, so I encourage people to reach out to me, friend request me, follow me, and one of my goals is to try to reach out to everyone via messaging and kind of grow the community, because as much as I started this as kind of let's see what happens, I'm starting to see that this is bigger than me, and I need help. It's not I'm not the end all be all, and I want to and in order for us to accomplish our goals and to create this movement, and in order to get people into officiating or into growing the sport of hockey, I'm going to need a lot of help, and I understand that, and I want to encourage people to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, I think Dave, that's a great message to send out, and like I said, thanks again for your help, and I hope you have a good rest of your day here.
All right, thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.